Well, welcome everyone. Thanks for joining us. This is the NextGen event series leading up to the NextGen Summit. And the NextGen committee designed this to create this opportunity for women in the first 15 years of their careers, though it's open to everyone because the insights you will hear from these three incredible women are really for everyone at all stages of their career, but really to help identify these core pivot points. And so this one is really about up-leveling your career and identifying where you can, really advocate for yourself, lean into your power. And I know you're going to love what they all have to say. So Joan, would you like to add anything really quickly to the intros?
No, just welcome everyone. Very excited to see all of you here today. This is the kickoff of our NextGen webinar series, so expect to see more of these throughout the year. And very soon we'll be announcing our NextGen community that you can join. It will be live very shortly. And so stay tuned for more information on that. And just thrilled to have these three panelists with us. And so let's get started.
And I will share really quickly, the next event is on May 9th for Pitching to Win. So save that date. The announcement will come out soon, and get it on your calendars now so you don't miss it. All right, well, without further ado, let me share who's in the room here. We've got Sri Atluri, who's Chief IP Counsel at Walmart. She has experience in all aspects of intellectual property litigation, transactions, patent preparation, and prosecution. She has represented clients in various federal district courts, before the International Trade Commission, before the Court of Appeals for the Federal Circuit, and before the Patent Trial and Appeal Board, including involvement in over 50 post-grant proceedings, as well as several ex parte and inter partes re-examinations and interference proceedings. And I'll just share that I met Sri through Vaishali Dupa, who's a member of our General Counsel Boot Camp, and really shows just the power of the ChIPs community and how incredibly well connected everyone is. Dorian Daley, who is one of our incredible ChIPs board members, serves as a board member for Panetta Institute for Public Policy and as a board director also at ChIPs. Of course, she most recently served as executive vice president and general counsel of Oracle Corporation. She began her career at Oracle in 1992 after practicing in the commercial litigation group of Landells, Ripley, and Diamond in San Francisco. She graduated from Santa Clara University School of Law and Stanford University undergrad. And Arlene Arin Hahn, who's a partner at White & Case and the global head of the technology transactions practice within the firm's global M&A group and global IP group. She is a transactional attorney who represents clients in a variety of intellectual property and technology matters, ranging from standalone technology transactions to the IP aspects of private equity, M&A, and other corporate transactions. So welcome. Thank you for being here for this program to uplevel your career, gain visibility, increase your confidence, and be specific with your objectives. And I think it's really interesting that the three of you have had similar and yet very different ways of getting to this point in your career. So Dorian, I'll start with you. How do you get to the next step in your career when switching jobs or getting a promotion is not an option? And I know that you have had such an incredible career at Oracle, going all the way to the highest position. And you had a lot of interesting paths that you took within your time at Oracle. Can you share that story with us?
Sure. I only switched jobs once, and that was when I moved from private practice after I'd been in private practice for 5 years to Oracle. And then I was at Oracle for 31 years. And it wasn't that there weren't, opportunities outside of Oracle. There are always opportunities. I just wasn't interested in those opportunities because the opportunities within the organization were pretty interesting. And it was an environment where I could continue to learn and take on new and different things. And as the company grew and moved into different areas, that's where a lot of the learning came from. I was doing things sometimes that I had never done before. So for me, it was a matter of putting myself in a position where I was continuing to work on those new things that were coming into the company, not just because you gain visibility by doing that, but because that was the opportunity to learn. It was new and interesting, something different to do. So as we expanded more and more into applications, I got very, very involved in all of the work that was being done to acquire PeopleSoft, which was it was chaos for 18 months, absolute chaos. It's not great to be involved in 3 different lawsuits over an acquisition, including one by the US government. It's never fun to be sued by the US government. And in all of these different lawsuits, sometimes there were just these really sort of competing priorities. So trying to keep that all together was pretty interesting. But it was something that I jumped into because I knew how important it was to the company, and it was an incredible opportunity to learn. You know, I hear sometimes from women especially, you know, I'm not sure if I can do X or Y because I've never done it before. We've never done any of this stuff before. And the first time that I handled an antitrust case was when we were sued by the US government and when we were in the crosshairs from the European Commission. So just diving into those kinds of things and getting the best expertise around me and learning a great deal about it, which was really fun and exciting. You know, that was a really, really important thing to me. And those kinds of experience, same sort of thing with Sun Microsystems, same sort of thing with, you know, various investigations or other pieces of litigation, diving into those kinds of things and learning as much as possible. And sometimes just taking charge without being asked to take charge, but just when I would see a void, just stepping into that void to bring people along. And really importantly, within a company, to try to make sure that the management team remains calm, because they're not always calm. We know that. Sometimes management personnel can run about a little bit in a panic. And so our role as lawyers is to make sure they understand what the issues are, what the pathways are. Sometimes there's different pathways, and what the recommendation is and why, and then take them along on those particular the paths that are decided upon, but to try to keep them as calm as possible. You know, in doing all of that, when you dive in, you take on leadership, you always demonstrate that you're willing to learn. You're excited by learning. You're excited by the new and different things. You do gain visibility. People do notice that, and they think, all right, this is somebody who can be a leader. This is somebody who can bring people along. This is somebody who can stay calm under pressure, under fire. And I think those kinds of experiences that you have to sometimes just dive into, even when they look so ugly and so intimidating. If you do that, I think people really do notice it, and it propels you along. I think in ways that it's hard to imagine when you're in the middle of the mosh pit, but absolutely that's what the result is.
Dorian, you make it sound so easy. What if you aren't the one who's chosen to lead these new initiatives or take on that additional responsibility?
You know, sometimes you just step into them. You know, even if you're not the one who's chosen to lead them, I would say in some of these things that I did, I'm not sure that I was considered at the outset to be somebody who was going to lead it, but at the end, I was essentially leading it because I was willing to dive in. I was willing to do the work. I thought it was exciting. I thought it was new, and I thought it was interesting. And so people will notice whether or not you're just slogging through something. You're just, you know, boy, this is really, I got to get through this. Or if you're excited about it and interested, and you're trying to think of novel approaches, and you're trying to keep the spirit of the rest of the team that are slogging through, you're trying to keep their spirit, all those things I think are really noticeable. So you basically step into the breach. You did this many, many times over the course of my career. You just have to raise your hand. And sometimes you raise your hand for those things that nobody else really wants to get involved in because they look like they're total losers, or it's going to be a 2-year, 5-year slog. You do that. And from my experience, those have been the most fun. I've learned the most from them, and they've certainly gotten me a tremendous amount of attention.
Thank you. We'll come back to that. Sri, I want to come to you. You came from HPE to Walmart to be the head of IP counsel. Tell us about that transition and the thing that really stood out for you in making that career switch.
Yeah, definitely. And honestly, I guess it even started before that. I mean, for me, when I went from private practice to HPE, it was one of those career moves that didn't really seem to make a lot of sense. I had been an IP litigator for about 10 years and then went into HPE as a patent prosecutor, portfolio manager, and it was pretty sort of orthogonal to the direction that my career had taken up until that point. And, you know, for me, part of that decision was sort of taking a look at where I was in my career and saying, hey, I'm ready for something new. I'm ready to try something different. And even if it feels like it's a different direction, even if it feels as if it's a lateral move or a step back, sometimes those moves can end up being the most interesting. And so sort of taking that initial step to go in-house for me, ultimately, you know, even though, to be honest, it really was, you know, sort of a much more junior kind of position than where I had been, really felt like that was what, for me, kind of put me in the direction that I needed to be in to kind of pursue my career, you know, and go down where I wanted to be. So at HPE, I started off as a portfolio manager for a little bit, and then I went back to IP litigation for a bit, and then went back to the patent group to lead it and to lead the patent department. And, you know, all of that, I guess, sort of helped set me up for this new career move, which was coming over to Walmart. And to be honest, it felt, and still does, scary every day, because there's a lot of things that weren't under my scope of responsibility previously. You know, but sometimes moving forward means taking a step back. Sometimes it means taking a step to the side, and sometimes it just means taking the leap and saying, hey, I can do this, you know, and just going for it. So that's kind of what brought me here. You know, it's been a little bit of being all over the place, but welcoming that change and that challenge, and looking to do new things and try something new.
How intentional were the changes you made within your career, within HPE and then to Walmart?
Yeah, it's funny because some were wholly unintentional and some were very well thought out. So when I came to HPE, I was at a point in my career where I was just feeling completely burned out. And rather than sort of taking the time to take a step back and say, hey, let me think about where I should go, I let it go too late. And I was at a point in my career where I was like, I either will stop working or I need to do something else. And so I took sort of, you know, I threw my resume out every single place I could think of. And I kind of took the first thing that came my way. So that was totally unintentional. You know, if I could have gone back and told myself, hey, let's take a step back 2 years before you get to this burnout phase, you know, maybe that would have been the better move. But after that, sort of finding myself where I was and having litigation be my first love, sort of the first thing that I did when I went to HPE was reach out to everyone in litigation and IP litigation and make those connections. You know, I had a formal mentor in a different part of the organization, but essentially I created several informal mentors in the litigation space, and probably bothered them so much that when a position opened up, I was the first to know, and I was the first to apply and get my name in, and thankfully I was able to make that move. And I think since then, I have absolutely tried to be more intentional in thinking about where I want my career to go. That, you know, that being said, sometimes it still ends up going somewhere different. I hadn't always planned to go back to the patent group and lead that group, but it fell in my lap, and, you know, I felt like I was the right person for that position at that time, and so I took it. And so I'd love to say that, oh, you know, I have plotted out my career. It's definitely not true. That being said, I'm also a firm believer in manifesting what you want your next career move to be. And so I've been trying that, you know, recently, and I'm very happy with where I am now. And, you know, I think being intentional is great, but I think it's also super important to sort of roll with the punches and see what comes your way and take advantage of it when something does.
I love that advice. Thanks. Arlene, you are the global head of tech transactions. Tell us how you got to that role.
Well, I love listening to both Dorian and Sri because there's so much, as you said, Monica, in common and so much that's different. And we've all set our course very differently. Like Dorian, I've only ever had one job switch. And I was at my old law firm for 15 years and at my current law firm, White & Case, for the past 8 years. And like Sri, a lot of it was unintentional. It wasn't mapped out. I never, ever thought I would be global head of a technology transactions practice. I started my career as an IP litigator at Weil Gotshal because I went to MIT and everyone assumed that I would be a patent lawyer. And I happened to have never met a lawyer until law school. So I listened to them and I loved patent law. It was very lucky and very serendipitous for me. And I loved soft IP law as well. But I think the reason why I've ended up here is echoing a lot of what Dorian and Sri have said, which is both a combination of intentionality and openness, but also flexibility and rolling with the punches. I think in order to survive in law, particularly now, particularly in tech and IP, which everyone is working in, you have to be able to change. You have to be able to evolve and understand that the market's evolving and the profession is evolving. Like Dorian said about, when Oracle was doing its acquisition, it was changing its business. And tech companies change our products, change our businesses all the time. So I've been very open in my career. I started as a litigator. I switched to a technology transactions lawyer, largely because my mentor and sponsor at the time said, we're starting a practice and think you'd be great at it. Not because I had ever intended to be a transactional lawyer, but I was open to it. Working through, the dot-com bubble bursting, the Great Recession, I became a IP lawyer with a specialty in restructuring because that's what was important during those times. And I think that if you are open to evolving and changing, then these opportunities do come to you. And like Dorian said, you just have to stretch. And like Sri said, you just have to take the leap sometimes. And so I've been very fortunate. I think you also mentioned, switching jobs at a law firm. Unlike my colleagues, I've never gone in-house except for a secondment. And so you don't really get promotions other than to partner. That's not really something that happens in a law firm. And so I view it more as changing the nature of your job. In addition to being global head of my practice, I've been fortunate enough to serve as chair of our global diversity committee. I've been a pro bono leader. I've been on our pension plans committee. I've had lots of different roles at my law firm. And I think that's how I've upskilled the best that I can as a partner. It's not just the practice, but it's also understanding the systems and structures that are in place in my law firm or in your company and making sure that you're meeting as many people as possible and understanding how the business of law works for where you are.
Something that stands out that all of you shared is this power of visibility to make sure that the right people are aware of your strengths and career goals and can support you on your career journey. How did you get that visibility? And what are some of the strategies that you would recommend for those who are listening? Dorian, would you like to start?
Sure. Well, I think you start early and you start without the knowledge, really, I think, about who the right people might be as your career progresses. So I've always thought, one of the most important things, frankly, in any job, but certainly in our jobs, is to start building those relationships. And you build those relationships early, and you treat the person who's in the collections group the same way you treat the SVP. Because you never know what's going to happen with that person in the collections group, because ultimately they're going to become the head of finance. It's possible. And at Oracle, there were many instances where people had these, when I was relatively junior at Oracle, over time, these people, their careers progressed. And, we had worked well together. We'd worked closely. I'd helped them out on something that was complicated, and they remembered that. So you try to make as many relationships as possible, and you treat your clients equally, and understand that even though if you're working with the SVP on a multi-million-dollar transaction or litigation or whatever, and you're working with the collector on $100,000 collections case, those things are really, really important to those people. And if you can convey that to them, that you know how important it is, they remember that. The other thing is the key is, at least when you're in-house, is understanding the business. And for many of us that we're in big companies, HP, Walmart, you've got different business units, and they all may have, different priorities. So really learning those different business units, the people that run them, what's really, really important to them, their priorities, their strategies, being able to demonstrate that not only do you have a good grasp of all the legal issues that they're going to be facing and how to solve some of their problems, but you really understand the business issues as well. That certainly gets you noticed. And you can do all of that as a very, very junior person. And some of that is just through asking questions, learning about things, go to team meetings and just asking some questions. Asking questions is a great way to gain visibility. Sometimes people are afraid to ask questions because it demonstrates that there's something that you don't know. Of course, there's something that you don't know. And people love to share what they do know. And as they understand that you're learning about those things and you're open to taking information in, again, that gets you noticed. So I think you can do all of that at a very, very early stage of your career. You should be doing that. And then as you become more senior, you do identify and you become much more closely aligned, I think, just as a matter of habit, with the people that are more senior that are coming to you, asking you to solve their problems. And so you build that visibility, I think, over time by being really consistent and steadfast in the way that you service your client. But I'd say even when you become more senior and you're working with the SVPs and the EVPs and the CEO and the board members, I think it's just really important to not remember those people in the collections department or the folks that are working on bankruptcies or some poor person in a business unit that's struggling with how to deal with a particular policy that's tripping up their business in some kind of way. Those people really do matter to the organization, and they will continue to advance as well. And I think you build a tremendous amount of support through the entire organization. But when you don't forget those folks too, as you begin to rise through the organization, you've got your eye on the ball for lots of different business units and people at different levels of their careers.
Yeah, I love this relevance of knowing who is the client and then appreciating and recognizing people at all levels of the organization. Yeah. Sri?
Yeah, I mean, I totally agree with Dorian. I think making sure that sort of treat everyone, with as much importance, as you might treat the CEO of your company. The other thing I would say is sometimes it can be really hard to know who needs to, have visibility into what you're doing. And it can also be hard to sort of make those connections so that the right people have that visibility, especially when you're joining a new organization or looking to do something in particular, especially a large organization like Oracle or Walmart. So much of the time it's just figuring out who to even talk to, and that takes, the bulk of sort of the time and effort in solving a problem. I tend to just reach out, and especially now in sort of this Zoom world where you can grab some time on anyone's calendar, if not directly, then through their admin. I tend to try and grab 15, 20 minutes for a quick meet and greet or a touch base. That's, one of the things that I tried to do when I first came to Walmart is I just threw a million, kind of 15-minute meet and greets on the calendar. And it had sort of several different aims in doing that. One was, of course, to make sure I was meeting with all of the business leaders and getting to know them, and making those connections so that if there is a problem down the line, I know who to reach out to. But two, I was also looking for an informal mentor and trying to find that person or persons that I would connect with and could help me down the line. Help me figure out where to go to solve a problem, help me figure out who I need to be talking to, hopefully help me, by being a sponsor down the line, or if I could return that favor for them. And I think that's part of it. It is not being too scared to kind of put yourself out there and meet people and, introduce yourself and tell them what you do and what you're looking to do.
Thank you. Arlene?
Yeah, no, I agree with everything, obviously, Dorian and Sri have been saying. I would say when I joined White & Case as a new partner, I was given a really simple piece of advice from someone who had just joined, which was go to everything. And I took it literally. I went to everything. Like if someone had a training, if someone had a book launch, anything, to the point where our events team was like, here's Arlene, she's back again. And I would, introduce myself. And I seem very extroverted, but I'm actually not. And so I think what I was forcing myself to do was find a way that I could authentically connect with people around something that they were interested in, not around something that I was necessarily even involved in. And what that did was it really helped me build a network of people throughout the firm, not just lawyers, not just partners, but also our business services leaders, our support staff, who really helped me then navigate the organization and said, you should really meet this person. They're a great person to know. And from that, I think it's so critical that you build actual friendships with the people that you work with. Because especially as women, self-promotion can be very tricky. It can be viewed as kind of icky, and even by other women. And so if you have true friendships, these are people who now speak for you and promote you and you for them. And it comes across as way less icky for me to say, Monica is incredible, Dorian, you have to meet her. She's so talented at X, Y, Z. Than Monica saying, I'm so incredible, I do X, Y, and Z. And so having those friendships and those real connections, I think, is so important. And being able to navigate at any level of the organization who are kind of the good people, the right people that you should connect with.
I love that.
I love that. I really love that. And I do think that's important. And when I talk about building relationships, that's a big part of it. You do want to enjoy the people that you're working with. And there's a mindset here, I think, that's consistent among what we're all saying is that when you demonstrate to other people that you're trying to help them, they're new to the organization. Let me tell you a little bit about the organization. Here's how I can help you. Here's how these people can help you. And you're trying to sponsor people. You're trying to bring them along. You're trying to solve their problems. You naturally gain the visibility. You don't even need to have the intentionality here to try to gain that visibility. You're just going to do it because you are there. You are present and you are solving problems for people and helping them out.
So true, Dorian. I've worked in business development and marketing in law firms for a really long time. And the people doing the business development know who's getting pitched what. And that's how they form a team. And that's, when they're talking to partners to put together the team, that's how they can advocate for someone who's new to the firm or who hasn't had that opportunity yet. And so if you know who's leading those business operations, even in-house, I imagine, Dorian and Sri, you have these opportunities to know the business side, to know who's making those decisions, to gain their confidence and trust, and then have them thinking of you. Yeah.
Sure.
So there was a really interesting comment in the chat about burnout. Thank you, Katie McBride Fields, for sharing that. And Sri mentioned that. And I know that all of you have had different ways of dealing with this. So I'd love to turn it over to this question around burnout, because each of you had some really interesting examples of owning your power and finding ways to do it differently. Sri, do you want to start first since you mentioned burnout specifically?
Sure. It was definitely not, the proudest moment in my career. I had just gotten to a point where I was working a lot, and I had tried actually a track that I think many women try without any success. Or some try it like Dorian with success, but I tried to go part-time, and that for me did not work well. I sort of had the worst of all worlds when I tried that. I was still working a lot. I felt like I shouldn't be, but I wasn't good at protecting my schedule, and I was getting paid less. And, it just felt like I was trying to do more in less time. So for me, that got to a point where I just, the best thing for me to do was get out of that situation. If I had been a little bit more aware, I think I could have talked to the right folks at the firm in advance and hopefully managed that better. But for me, the way that I dealt with it was I just started looking for other opportunities. And when I came across one, I took it, and it turned out to be a great opportunity. And I am so happy that I did that. But I wouldn't recommend that that's where other people, or how other people handle it. I think really sort of checking in with yourself on a more regular basis would have held me in good stead at the time if I had done that. Sort of stopping and pausing and determining whether I was happy where I was would have been a smart thing to do. That's what I recommend of people who I see approaching that now, because once you get to that point, you don't have the time and space to really think about what your next step is. You're at a breaking point. And so, I think now I would be much better at sort of seeing those red flags. I know that I've helped some of my colleagues when I see them reaching that point. I've tried to pull them aside and let them know, hey, I see this happening for you. And I see, unless you are willing to talk to your superiors about this, it's going to be the exit, because I've been down that road before, and, you kind of hit a wall at some point. So that's, my biggest piece of advice there would be, if you're heading down that road, sometimes the only way to really be able to see it and catch it is just make sure that you're kind of setting up some time where you stop and you pause and, amidst all the craziness, you kind of ask yourself some really basic questions like, is this where I want to be? Is this, and sometimes the answer is yes. It's just in that moment, you need to take a step back,
Arlene, I know we talked about some interesting ways of dealing with preventing burnout, and also we talked about the challenges with being part-time. Do you want to talk about that?
Yeah, sure, absolutely. I mean, one of the things that I think is empowering is learning to say no. Women obviously do a lot of the invisible work, not just in companies or law firms, but at home, and really learning to set boundaries, which I think is hard for a lot of women in particular. And I think, as Sri said, it's a lot about self-care and reframing and really understanding your boundaries and what you can do. For me, when I've reached the point of feeling, too stressed out, in addition to kind of self-care, what I do is really try to reframe and reprioritize and really figure out what are the things I care about and how to refocus on all of that. And I found that really helpful. I think also one of the big reframes of my life, and for a lot of, I think, people, is having children. And so once I had children, that really deprioritized a lot of things for me. I was able to say no to things a lot easier because that was then taking away from my time with my children. And so I think if you can think of the things that are most important to you, and hopefully, if you have children, if you don't have children, it should just be you. It should be the fact that it's you. We had a stress speaker come in and said, how many times when you're on 1% battery life, do you think, nah, it'll keep going past zero? Like it's almost there, but I'm just going to go for it. Or your car's, out of gas. How many times do you really think it's going to just keep running? And we all do that to ourselves and our bodies. And we say, no, I'll be fine, even though I only had 2 hours of sleep. And really treating ourselves like we do, others and other things, and making sure that we're taking care of ourselves. I've never gone part-time, so I defer to Dorian and Sri on that. But I do think in a law firm, thinking about my friends and colleagues who have done it, I think it's really difficult, particularly in a law firm, to do that because of just the way that, the way billable hour works and the way that the flow of work comes in. But it is something that I know equity women partners who are part-time, I know it's possible. I think you have to be really creative and really committed, and your firm has to be equally creative and committed.
Well, I know that Dorian has been really creative in that way.
Yes.
Have you share your story, Dorian, of how you made that work for you?
Sure. I had moved to Oracle when I had one son, and I'd been there for a few years. I think my son was 3 when I moved to Oracle, maybe 2. And then I had a second child, and I worked in a litigation team of all women. And we went through this cycle about, every 6 months to a year, one of us was having a child. So it was actually a fantastic environment because we all got it. We all understood what was going on, and we're helping each other out. And I had taken off 6 months each time one of my sons was born. And when I was on maternity leave with my second son, I was thinking about, well, I'd like a reduced schedule, at least for some period of time. And I had this great example of my twin sister and my mother, who were teachers, who had both done job shares. So I started thinking about that in the context of, a corporate legal department, and I worried about many of the issues that Arlene, you were talking about, and how do we structure this whole thing. And so I went to an outside resource and talked to somebody about that. They were mostly focused on other industries, trying to set up these kinds of structures, job structures, but in other industries. And we just, talked through the number of issues. And one of my colleagues had also just, had a baby as well. And of course, I talked to my mother and my sister. And so we put together a proposal. So their attorney and I, very, detailed proposal about how we would back each other up. So we would go to 3 days a week. We would back each other up, though, on the particular matters, so that it would really minimize the impact for the rest of the department. They wouldn't have to hire somebody else in as cover. We would be able to cover each other. And because we were both in the same situation, we were very, very sensitive to the time that we wanted to be able to be at home. And when we wanted to be at home, when we were going to be at home, we were going to be at home. We weren't going to be taking phone calls. We weren't going to be doing those kinds of things. And it worked out fantastically. We put together the proposal, wrote it up, put it on the desk of the general counsel and the head of the litigation department, because we thought it was a pretty good idea to do them both at the same time, particularly since the general counsel at that time was a very progressive-minded guy who liked innovation in all things. And he was very excited about the prospect, and he loved the idea that this was something that Oracle Legal was going to pioneer. I don't know that it got a lot of play, but it worked for us. And we did it for about 6 years without really much concern, given where we were, about whether or not that was going to impact our careers or our ability to advance, because we were getting the job done. It was just a matter of how we were doing it. And it was sort of blind to everybody else in the group because nobody else was burdened by it. Was it a little bit more work at the end of the day? Yeah, it was. You have to manage it. And then you have to be super disciplined about not taking all of those calls on the day off. So on one day that was with one son, one day that was the other son. And I was very, very focused. And ultimately, the attorney that I did the job share with, she left Oracle. I went to part-time for a while. That was harder, just to do part-time without a job share, frankly. And so I did it for maybe another 1.5 or 2 years, and then ultimately went back to full-time. I can say for sure, obviously, it had no impact on my career advancement. It did teach me, I think, a lot about prioritization. And, I didn't think about it at the time but really self-care. And I do think trying to understand the balance that we all seek, particularly as working mothers or working women that are taking care of elderly parents or extended families, that balance isn't always perfect. And it will drive ourselves crazy if that's what we're thinking that we're going to achieve 100% of the time. Sometimes you're in trial, you're in the middle of a big transaction. It goes this way, and then it goes this way. But it's putting some structures in place that work for you and people around you and a team that supports it, that helps you, manage it as it's wobbling around too much, and not feeling guilty when it's a little out of whack, because you'll get it back into whack. You've got the support, you've got the structure, you've got whatever you need to kind of get it back into some better equilibrium. So it worked, you know, incredibly well for me. And I do think you have to be able to take a step back, notwithstanding how we, you know, we're all working. Well, I'm not working so hard anymore, but you know, you're going 120 miles an hour, 24/7. But you do have to be able to step back and take some time for yourself, take some time for your family, make that a part of your even a part of your work. We had this great wall in the legal department and the litigation group, this wall that was just covered with pictures of our children. And when the day that I left Oracle, I went by that wall, I literally cried because, you know, there's my little boy and all of these other children, but we made, you know, our lives a part of one another. And that helped us support one another in the jobs that we had to do. Even the men that ultimately came into the litigation group were doing this as well. So I think you can make it a part of your overall work environment. But then you've got to be able to step away from time to time and just focus on you and your family, finding whatever those things are that recharge you.
There's a related question in the chat about advice on leaving and returning from maternity leave and how to stay on track with career. Do any of you have advice to offer on how to create that seamlessness coming back in from maternity leave?
I think when you're on maternity leave, you need to be on maternity leave. So I'm not an advocate of, you know, keeping your hand in the water while you're on maternity leave. I mean, it's a real benefit. And I think you should take advantage of the benefit. I think you should maintain the relationships with the people in the department. So I'm not advocating cutting off those communications. Presumably they become your friends as well as your colleagues. And, you know, we're all curious. So we're interested in various legal developments that might impact our employment, even if we're taking a little bit of a break. But I think it's good to take that time away. But then when you're back in and you're back in the office, you're in the office. You're focused on that. That's the thing that you're doing. You're not spending half of your day showing baby pictures. I don't think that's a helpful sort of thing. It might make you feel kind of, you know, great, but at the end of the day, I don't think that's a particularly helpful thing. I think when you're at work, you're really at work. You are on track. You're on focus, and you're catching up to a large extent. So there's a little bit of work that goes into it. At least my experience was coming back in after maternity leave to catch up on some of the things that had gone on in the company and some of the things that had gone on in the legal department, to really dive back into those things, new policies, new contract structures, you know, a new business unit, and you do the work. You just do that work.
Yeah, I agree. Sorry, I was going to say, I think it's not unlike joining a new organization and the same things that you would do at a new organization that we covered.
Yeah.
Of, you know, just checking in with people, getting some time, like Sri said, or checking in, like Dorian said, of, you know, what have I missed? What's new? What have we been doing that's different? The one thing I will say is have a lot of grace for yourself, particularly if it's a maternity leave. I remember my second maternity leave, I felt like a marshmallow. Like I couldn't remember basic things that I had done, you know, for years, for decades before. And it took me, you know, probably a week or so in the trenches for that part of my brain to reactivate. And so have the grace to be gentle. It'll all come back. It'll all come back, but it may take a week or so for it to come back.
I guess the only other thing I would say is not to feel guilty that you've left, whether it's maternity leave, family leave, whatever it is. I think, look, we all cover for each other when a colleague leaves, right? You don't want them to feel guilty that you're covering for their paternal leave or maternal leave or whatever it might be. And in the same way, you should not feel guilty if you have to take a leave. Take your time because you'll come back better refreshed to do the job.
And that could be any leave, whether it's family leave or sabbatical or any kind of situation that brings you away from work. It's this returning part. It sounds like similar advice. You all make this sound so easy. You walk in, you build trust, you identify who the key players are, you create relationships, you are clearly like the smartest person in the room at all times. So is it always this easy? And I know the inner critic can be really strong, and we're capable of telling ourselves, a lot of negative chatter. Do any of you ever have self-limiting beliefs? And if so, what do you do when that happens?
Well, it's not, I mean, it's not easy. I mean, there's the whole, all the substantive stuff that you need to learn, all the things about your company that you need to learn, the personalities that you need to learn, the proper language to use with different personalities, because different people take in information different kinds of ways. That's not all easy. And as you're juggling it amongst many, many different demands. So I don't think any of us would say that it's easy, but it's in a way, it's easy to learn. It's actually easy to ask questions. It's easy to be kind. It's easy to be helpful. It actually is kind of easy to dig in, because you are in that process. You are learning, but there's a lot. It's not easy to always prioritize things. So I don't think we don't really mean to suggest that this is all easy. It's hard work that we do. Hard issues that we deal with, serious consequences, big risks. Stress is involved with all that, which is why we all think it's so important to make sure that we've got time for ourselves to be able to refresh, relax, be able to come back. And I don't think any of us has ever had no self-criticism. Criticism is a good thing. It's, constructive criticism is just that, it's constructive. And when we do go through something, if we've made an outright mistake or we could have done better, we should be reflecting on that. I could have handled this better. I could have done that better. I don't think that's a bad thing. I think that's a good thing. It's how we learn. It's that sort of paralyzing self-doubt. Oh my gosh, I've never done this. How can I do it? Look, if you're smart and you're willing to dig in, and you want to learn, you want to do something new and exciting, you'll do it. We've all done that thing for the first time and managed to get through it. I think you just have to have that, that confidence that you will learn, and you will make mistakes, and then you correct them. And so long as you're willing to take that on as well, I think you're going to be successful. But there's a difference between being self-critical so that you can learn and you can improve, and that sort of paralyzing self-doubt where you believe that because you haven't done something before, you're not going to be able to do it. You just have to remember, you couldn't walk when you were crawling until you started walking. You couldn't speak until you started speaking. You couldn't speak that second language until we learn. We take the steps and we learn, and it's exciting and interesting and frankly a lot of fun.
I think that's so important, Dorian. Especially, I really love what you said earlier about staying calm and being kind. Those are superpowers that can't be emphasized enough. And also, it seems like maybe you worked in this magical place where people see you and allow this to happen and want you to be successful and allow you to make mistakes. And I think there are some workplaces that aren't that kind.
I think that's probably true. I think if you find yourself in a workplace where you can't be your true self, and you can't get across the points that you're trying to make, if you're being made to feel less than you are all of the time, if your intellect is being, I do think, why would you stay in a place like that? That is, because you're not going to have that ability to learn and to grow. And fundamentally, I think we as human beings, we do want to learn. We do want to grow. We do want to do the next thing. You don't typically find a whole lot of people, at least in our profession, who want to do the exact same thing over and over and over and over and over and over. Right? We're curious. We want to solve problems. And so I think if you find yourself in an environment where that just very clearly is not going to happen, notwithstanding your efforts, because sometimes you have to make that effort, and sometimes it's considerable effort to be able to get that visibility, have people recognize what it is that you can do and what you're prepared to do. Sometimes that means you do have to make that leap. You do have to change from one place to another, for sure.
I have a confession, which is I worked with someone who was not very nice for a very long time, and it was really difficult. And I think ultimately that's why the values of your organization are so important, because I think he was kind of my nemesis and for many years. And ultimately his values didn't align with White and Case's values and he left. And I feel like my values align with White and Case's values, and being kind of a jerk didn't align here and he wasn't successful. And ultimately, I think when you pick an organization whose values align with yours, those types of people ideally leave because they're not going to do well. They're not aligned with kind of the vision or the values of the organization. What I will say about kind of the self-limiting beliefs is I love being, obviously we're all tech IP people. What I love about practicing now is all the research and all of the social science that has come out and all the ways in which we can kind of hack our brains and our bodies to make ourselves seem stronger or be stronger. And there was one book that's changed my career, which is The Confidence Code, which was written by Katty Kay and Claire Shipman. And there's an Atlantic version of it that's like a cribbed article version that really, dilutes it all down. There have been criticisms of it, but I will say that the research stands, and the research about how men and women are different in confidence, in taking risks, in not, going for promotions and downplaying our skills. It was eye-opening for me, especially with respect to this nemesis, because I always wondered, why do you act so confident? You're not better than me. I don't think maybe you are better than me. And until I read this article, I was like, oh no, you're literally just a man and I'm just a woman. And I actually maybe am more confident than you, but we have different levels of confidence. And so reading the data and really understanding the ways in which we can help ourselves not see threats and help ourselves take risks. We had a stress speaker come in and she actually explained how if you say the sentence, this is stressful, but it's making me stronger, even if you don't believe it, even if you don't believe it's making you stronger, it actually makes you stronger. It actually makes you smarter. It turns on all the positive things. And so to me, it's about really, taking those negative thoughts and really trying to hack them in the way that social science has taught us we can hack them. Take the compliments, even though it feels gross, take the compliments and internalize them for the 3 minutes that they say you should internalize them, instead of just being like, oh no, I'm not that great, like a poo-poo, put it away. Like actually really try to internalize it. And doing all of those things, that's helped me a lot. And I'm an Korean immigrant child whose parents were like, you're not that great, you're not that great. And so self-limiting beliefs was really how I was raised, right? How a lot of us were raised, I think. And, there's so much now that we could do to help us. And I think those mini steps actually do help to elevate you.
I love everything that Arlene and Dorian just said. And I agree with all of it. And it's funny how much of myself I see in all of that. The last thing I would say is when I am feeling unworthy or I'm feeling like I'm doubting myself, I just turn into the engineer and lawyer that I am. And I look at it logically and I look at the evidence and I say, okay, how many times have I not known what I was doing when I went into something? And how many times did I come out, pretty much every time I've managed to figure it out and I get where I need to go. And so that's what I do. I build the case for myself until I'm like hyped up again and ready to go. And that's how I attack it.
So we have 2 more questions in the next 4 minutes. One is from the chat and it's about how you prepare for a future role, being a manager, leading a team for the first time. And you all have touched on this to some extent. Stepping into something for the first time, how do you get the person to hire you to do that thing for the first time?
Well, the first time I became a manager, I just was chosen. I didn't apply for it. The manager of the litigation team was leaving, and she and the general counsel just believed that I was the person to take it over. But I hadn't properly managed people, officially managed people up to that point, although I had managed projects which involved lots of different people and my, giving instruction and reviewing work and things like that. So I think a lot of times when you move into that kind of a role, you have to think about the experiences you've had that help prepare you for it, because probably you've had experiences where you're not maybe directly managing somebody officially, but you're managing effectively a team on a particular project. So take from that what has been helpful, what has worked, and what has not worked. Take advantage of company or firm resources on management. I mean, they really are useful. Every once in a while, you're going to come across something or some comment in it, and it's going to make you groan. You're going to think, "Oh my God, really? Do I need to listen to this kind of stuff?" But by and large, I think it's helpful because you are thinking about things in a different kind of way. It's not just about you and your work. But I think the thing that can be the most helpful is to make it sort of simple in terms of what your role is as a manager, because your role is to lead, to set direction, to provide the information that comes down from your senior management, so literally to lead. But equally, or maybe even more important, it is to support. It's to support your team. You want to make your team successful. And I think if you think about it that sort of simply, it's really, really helpful. But don't scrimp on, going to the management training sessions, because I do think they actually are really useful.
I wanted to ask one final question, which is, what is the most important thing that has stood out for you in your career advancement? If there's something that each of you could share in like a 5 to 10 second answer on what has stood out for you most.
Well, I can say there's not one thing that has stood out for me the most. I would say there's sort of a combination of things, and you probably heard a lot of it in this session. Building those relationships, being consistent, being persistent, because we have to be very persistent, embracing change, and really embracing it, not as a like, oh, it's such a burden, but it's something that's really new and exciting. Raising your hand, because that's the way that you're going to get noticed, and then always acting with integrity. I think, when we think about some of the core things that we need to do in the roles that we have in-house or as outside counsel, I think all of those things are really important for us to be successful and to give us the opportunity then to be able to move into leadership.
I completely agree. I think I echo everything Dorian just listed. I think another thing that has stood out to me is sponsorship, and really finding, people who are willing to put their time and resources and, even political capital out there for you. That's something that I don't think I was ever taught, never thought I would ever need, never even knew existed until I got to my current firm. And once you have a sponsor, you realize how important that relationship can be. And so that's something that's really made a big difference for me as well.
Yeah, I definitely agree with Dorian and Arlene. The other thing I would say, and this sounds so trite, but it's just be yourself. I think, especially in tech and law, sometimes you can be told that you have to fit a mold. I mean, really just in life in general, you can be told that. And I know the first many years of my career, I pretended to be someone much less colorful, much more serious and straight-faced than I really am. And when I finally just decided, okay, I'm going to give myself permission to be me, I felt so much more comfortable and happy in what I was doing.
People like working with happy people, right? But when you get to show up and be happy and create calm and kindness, it's just magical. So that was incredible. I've taken so many notes. I really appreciate all three of you being here. Sri, Dorian, Arlene, thank you so much. Thank you all for joining us for this program. Join us again on May 9th. Check out the ChIPs website, chipsnetwork.org, if you have any questions, and feel free to reach out and connect on LinkedIn.